Hi, so welcome to the second in our energy podcast we're doing here at Leyton. Last month we did a piece on Leyton's core energy proposition, which is essentially being experts in the non-commodity side of energy bills. And today we thought it'd be really nice to look at the other side of energy bills, the side that is not necessarily Leyton's area of expertise, but is equally a large part of a lot of businesses' costs, and that is the commodity side of energy bills. So we're welcoming today Ian from Mindful Energy.
Hello.
So Ian's going to help us understand a bit more about the commodity side. I've worked with Ian in the past for some time, so I've known Ian a number of years. I think he's well placed to give us a bit of an understanding as to how commodity costs impact businesses' energy. So maybe to kick us off, it'd be good maybe for Ian to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a bit about Mindful Energy.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thanks for having me, Zach. Mindful Energy, we believe businesses should feel good about energy. Energy costs are often seen as a problem, as a liability, as a pain, as noise, but actually that shouldn't be the case. So if a customer is on the best rates, if they're using the least amount of energy possible, these are good things. So we want to help customers actually realise that energy can be a good thing for their business so they can focus on the things that actually matter. So energy procurement, energy management, energy efficiency. That's what we do at Mindful Energy.
Okay, good. So from your point of view then, what drives commodity costs? So for me, what I tend to see is certainly when we're talking to clients, there's a lot of noise about the cost of energy, but of course we talk heavily around the fact that the non-commodity side takes up probably more of a percentage of a bill than the commodity side. And yet it's the commodity side that gets talked about a lot,
Yes.
Particularly in the domestic markets. We hear a lot of talk about price caps, we hear lots of conversations about prices going up, prices going down. What does drive the commodity cost? What drives energy costs?
Good question. So with regards to electricity, you're right, around 35-40% of the bill is commodity, but that tends to be most of the noise that people talk about and all the other non-commodity costs you guys deal with your clients. So in terms of the commodity side, if you chunk it to its highest levels, there's four ultimate things. So supply, demand, weather, sentiment. So whatever's going on in the world, whatever's going on with energy prices, one of those four elements are combining to kind of drive the prices up or drive the prices down. And like the analogy I often use with my customers that are unsure about this is holidays, really. So if you were to book a holiday, I don't know, let's say you want to go to the south of France, but you want to go in August. The realities are it's the peak time for holidays, kids are all off school, really nice and warm. So all of the supply-demand equations kind of drive it to be a costly experience. It's the same with energy. So energy is typically cheapest during the summer. So summer in energy terms is first available through to the end of September. And that's generally because demand is at its lowest across the UK. And then running from 1st of October through to the end of March, electricity, gases tends to be more expensive. And what's driving that is the supply. There may be supply issues, the demand's increased, it's colder weather, etc., etc. And then you kind of layer on top of all of that the word sentiments. What might happen? So ultimately, it's a real mixed bag, but the highest intention of energy prices that's driving it, is there enough energy, how many people want it, and what's going on in the world. Nice and easy.
Yeah.
Nice and simple to navigate.
But the what's going on in the world, I would guess, right now, or certainly the last 4 or 5 years, has been I would guess, being a huge factor. I mean, I look at the cost of energy obviously skyrocketed 3-4 years ago, but even now there seems to be so much going on in the world. Are you seeing that as something that's driving the price right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So go back 3 years ago, which you referenced, so the Ukraine Russia crisis was the key catalyst for that. So the West turned off, metaphorically and literally speaking, gas imports from Russia. So that supply-demand equation was massively disruptive. Will we have enough gas to fuel electricity generation, to fuel heating within Western Europe? And the answer was we were unsure. So energy markets spiked. There's a few other bits and pieces going on at the time as well, but ultimately demand supply issue, which is what we were talking about. Fast forward to today, it's a lot of sentimental drives going on in the energy markets. Really frustrating for us as UK business owners, because actually the fundamentals of the UK are quite strong. So the industry systems are working well, the energy generation systems are working well, but if something kicks off in Israel, as it has done, and Gaza, that has a dramatic impact on us, because the sentiment in the market would be that might drive oil prices higher, which has a ripple effect onto other commodities such as gas and electricity. So even though that's not directly impacting the supply and demand equations in the UK, the ultimate sentiment of the markets, the tradable markets, is driving volatility, which is difficult for a typical energy buyer to navigate.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the thing that potentially maybe our clients, but any business in the UK probably struggles with is the fact that these outside factors that actually don't impact a manufacturing business in Wolverhampton is really directly influencing them and really directly influencing the cost that they're having to deal with. So I'll go back to that example, a manufacturing business in Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
There's not a great deal they can do about a conflict in Israel. There's not a great deal they can do with a conflict in the Ukraine. But what can they do? What would you suggest is a good thing for them to do to try and mitigate those outside risks?
Good question. So I'd say there are 4 key things that they can do. Take a long run up to your renewal. So if you have a gas or electricity renewal, you can technically renew up to 2-3 years in advance. So what a lot of businesses do, they just put their head in the sand, forget about it until a reminder comes up or the renewal letter comes from the energy supplier, which might be 3 or 6 months before the renewal date. Some customers leave it to the last month, which is their prerogative, and there is some evidence to suggest that that works historically, but not always the case. But if you're 3 months away from your renewal and there's another global crisis which spikes the market, you have no time left to mitigate. So we would strongly advise our clients to kind of do some price discovery testing 9 to 12 months before the renewal. What does that budget look like? Is it a shock? If it is, then you can start to think about that from a budget perspective. Are you seeing massive savings? Hopefully. And you might decide, well, actually, let's just take the value off the table. So, or you might just sit on your hands and wait. But going early like that and gives you the visibility about what your potential energy costs would be and gives you time to act if they're not quite as exciting as you'd hoped or they're super exciting. So that would be the first one. Second one would be how you buy energy. So a lot of Leyton's clients will be large energy users, and when you use a lot of energy, you can buy flexibly. So most customers fix their energy, a bit like a fixed mortgage. The unit rate the mortgage company gives you is X, and then you fix your mortgage for 3 or 4 years, and you hope that that's a good decision. That's the same with energy contracts. A lot of customers will fix for 12, 24 or 36 months. The bigger users can actually break that down into smaller procurement segments. So let's say you have a 12-month contract, but you maybe buy each quarter. So what you're doing there is you're taking it's like having 4 lines on your lottery ticket, right? That you're going to get the winning numbers.
Yeah.
Whereas if you fix, so what is there, 220 working days in a given year? So if you fix your year, that's a 1 in 220 chance that you've got the day with the lowest price. So by buying more flexibly, you're spreading the risk really around energy and not locking into the highest price. You could be lucky and lock into the lowest price, but that is luck. It's not a judgment. I couldn't tell you when that day would be. If anybody else tells you that, then run a mile. So buying flexibly would be the second option, and there's a lot of nuance that sits behind that, but there's a lot of value on the table. The other thing would be different contract durations. So I mentioned 12, 24, 36 months.
Yeah.
They're not preordained durations. So if for whatever reason you decide maybe if you're a 1st of April start, I think I mentioned earlier that summers are cheaper. If you, rather than renewing for 24 months, renewed for 18 months, you'd be including 2 summers. So April for 25 for a summer, then the winter period running from 1st October through to next March, and then the April next summer period for summer 26. What that does is it brings down the weighted average price of that 18-month contract. Of
course.
Because you're avoiding the high prices of winter 26. So just by moving the end date of your contract, you can start to avoid some of these future costs down the line, which have high premiums in potentially. Again, some important nuances there. I think the last one is just to do common sense due diligence. So a lot of the customers I see that come to us, they've been stuck in a renewal with a common supplier and they're on super high rates because they've not gone out and got other quotes. So whether that's through an energy consultancy like Mindful Energy or going direct to suppliers, get at least 2 or 3 quotes just to sense check that the rates that you're seeing are sensible. But any decent energy consultancy worth the salt would go out to 7, 8, 9 suppliers, so to get you the best price possible.
Okay.
So four good things. If we summarise that just for simplicity, look at your renewal earlier, look at different contract end dates in terms of 12, 18 months, look at buying differently, and the last one was make sure you go out to a number of suppliers.
Okay, good. So that's fairly practical in terms of buying. I suppose so. So one area that actually we come across quite a lot, or I certainly come across quite a lot, is the work we do. We're often talking to financial directors, often talking to CEOs, and actually what we tend to find is the questions I get quite a lot, because we're talking to them about non-commodity costs, is they'll also ask us about their energy procurement.
Sure.
Not our area of expertise.
Get your crystal ball out.
Literally, the question I get asked so often is, what do you think the future's going to look like? What do you think will happen with energy prices? And I think two questions for me. First of all would be, have you got any thoughts on that? And what is your view on what maybe the next 12 months looks like for energy costs? And probably secondly, probably an interesting question, what would you suggest an FD? So often I tend to find a financial director will get the contract in front of them. Somebody's gone and done the work. They may have done some due diligence, they may not, as you say, but ultimately it will sit on the desk of a financial director to sign the contract and say, there you go.
Yep.
What kind of questions should that person be asking if they're not maybe directly involved in getting the quote? What kind of questions should they ask him to sense check whether or not it's a good deal? How do they know they've got a good deal?
Yeah, good question. So the first part, the crystal ball part, let's try and tackle that. In terms of non-commodity costs, as you guys know, they're projected to go up over the next 4 or 5 years unless they can work with an organisation like Leyton, kind of chip away at that. But if you're not doing anything proactively, your non-energy costs are going to be increasing. Yeah. At the moment, the wholesale costs for next year are looking lower than they are doing this year. So if you were to renew now, if you renewed last year and you're looking to renew now, you'd probably get a similar price because the non-commodity costs have gone up slightly and the energy costs have come down slightly, so they kind of average themselves out. So on the gas side, if you have an April 25 renewal, you're looking at somewhere between 4 and 5 pence per kilowatt hour, fully delivered plus your standing charge, depending on how much you use. And then on electricity, it's a little bit more complex. There's some important nuances, but somewhere between 20 to 23 pence per kilowatt hour is an expected fixed rate plus your typical standing charge that you would normally get. So those are the kind of rates that we're seeing for renewals next year, April and October accordingly. What's going to happen between now and then? So we have a belief that the market is overpriced. There's a lot of concerns built into the markets, mainly around this winter. Market traders get really uppity about this 1 in 50 winter. So we have a really prolonged cold winter period that causes supply-demand concerns that we talked about earlier on. Happens every year, happened last year. As we got into December, the market started to fall because it was pretty mild. Yeah. This big winter that we were expecting wasn't coming. The market collapsed into Q1. So we're kind of expecting that again. So the market's been rising up as we come into winter, typically. A bit bobbled around, but on the way up. I think as we get into December and early January, we'll start to see the markets come off. So our guidance now is unless you're desperate to renew and your renewal's not up until April next year, hold on until the new year. Okay. That would be what I'd be looking for in terms of that. In terms of your other point, what should an FD be looking for? So the FD should be looking for options. It all depends on their budgets and how their business is doing. So if the renewal is soon, they probably just need to be looking for the best price quickly. So going out to the market, doing their due diligence. If it's longer term, they should still look at the market now to at least give themselves a line and a sign about what their budgets are. They need to be concerned about energy consumption. So are they going to be doing anything different within their business that they had done before? So there's some risks around energy consumption variances. So you need to be avoiding that. You also need to be looking at opportunities to buying differently. So we mentioned before about buying flexibly. If an FD has enough consumption to play with, some suppliers will give them the tools to be able to buy differently. So again, the mortgage example, a tracker mortgage does exactly that. It will track the base rate plus a couple of points. Yep. A flexible supply contract will do that. It will track the market in a similar matter to enable them to kind of manage that energy cost and manage that energy risk. But those would probably be the two key ones. Is your business doing what it was doing last year, so no risk over consumption variances, and can you buy differently going forward?
Okay. In that case, so consumption, and you mentioned there, are they using as much energy? Is there energy consumption where they would want it to be, or has it changed, or has it moved differently? How important is it for businesses to understand how they're using their energy? Is that something that you find that most businesses have a handle on? And if not, is it something they should do?
So most businesses that we speak to do not have a handle on it. There might be a general awareness. So unless you have an energy management team and internal expertise, it's really difficult for businesses to get into the detail of energy costs and energy consumption. Some of the customers I speak to, when we talk to them about energy efficiency, they'll say to me, "Ian, don't worry, we've got smart meters." And I'm like, well, great. What that will do is ensure that your bills are accurate in terms of consumption. It's telling you how much your building is using on a half-hourly or daily basis. It's not telling you where within that building. So there's a kind of a limiting belief with some of our customers about what smart meters will do. So in the very first instance, most of our customers also don't check their bills properly. I think over the years I've heard so many statistics, but I read one recently, so 1 in 6 invoices are incorrect.
Yeah.
And the energy supply market's going through a lot of turmoil at the moment in terms of billing systems tripping over. So check your bills are correct in the first instance, whether that's through a bill validation provider or other. But to check them correctly, you need to be knowing what you're using in the first instance and have confidence about that. So we're advising our customers to install smart sub-metering. So a smart meter is a meter attached to your actual meter or the physical meter itself, which tells you how much your building is using. A sub-meter would be installed on the distribution board, so it's at appliance level. So you can see if people are leaving the lights on at night. It's simplistic. And you can see if you have a hotel with a large kitchen, you can see if the gas hobs have been left on it. The electricity systems are being left on overnight. So you can identify simple energy waste. You can't do that with a smart meter.
Okay.
You might realise there's a spike at 1 in the morning looking at your smart meter data, but you'll have no idea where that's coming from. Yeah. So going the next step to kind of get into the granularity of data. That's the real way of kind of driving energy savings, because the best kilowatt hour is the one you don't use.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think certainly from the clients we speak to, it's interesting what we do. We talk about non-commodity costs, and actually most clients we talk to have never really even broken that down. So they've very rarely broken their bill down into commodity and non-commodity, never mind anything else. So we find that clients will have a fair understanding of how much they're spending on energy, but that's probably as far as the granular detail goes. They just know that actually it costs us X amount. And I think sometimes we find that clients are paying a similar amount every year. That's a good deal for me. I'm paying exactly what I did last year. And actually not maybe taking into consideration the fact that lots has changed since last year. So actually your price should be different. So we tend to find a similar kind of thing. And I think that's for us one of the other reasons we think it's important to look at everything as a whole when it comes to energy, rather than just focusing on one area, which tends to have been procurement in the past. So.
Yeah, this is why it's super important when you're doing your price discoveries to go through 3 or 4 suppliers or through an energy consultancy that can kind of automate that process for you. Because otherwise you're just gambling, really.
Yeah, it's. I think it's similar to the conversations we have with a lot of clients around their expertise. It's utilise expertise, and I think
time's a big thing as well, right?
It absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's hard for any business, particularly if you look at the last 5 years, because if you include COVID in terms of the challenges, I mean, there's a lot of organisations I feel have been out there who've been fighting to keep the lights on. Yeah. Never mind actually then spending and investing time into thinking about actually what does my energy cost look like, particularly if you're in a fixed term contract that comes up every 2-3 years. It's not a full-time role for someone to spend all day looking at energy. So, it's quite difficult for them.
It is difficult. And, when I sit in front of some customers and tell them, I want to make you feel good about your energy, and they're like, Ian, that's ridiculous. And then when we go through the process and we say, well, actually, you couldn't use any less energy than you're using now. You're doing everything. You've got solar panels on the roof. You're looking at solar panels on your outside near the farm area that you're looking at, in this particular example in my mind. And also you're on really good rates. That's a good place to be. Yeah. You're also paying someone to check your bills. So actually have peace of mind that your energy management is in a good place. And so feel good about it. But very often energy costs and energy management is really complex. The taxes, people just don't understand it, so therefore it feels like a pain. But a little bit of education, a little bit of time spent on that with organisations like ours can give them the confidence they need to kind of move forward and be happy about their energy costs.
I think that's why I think podcast series like this we've kind of done them, so at least we give people a understanding of how things work. And I think my message has always been to clients: you don't need to be the expert in this area, but it's good to have an understanding of what's going on, and therefore it allows the business then to be asking the right questions, and as you say, actually feel good about their energy, therefore sleep easily at night saying, well, look, I've done everything I can, I've looked at every option, and actually we're in a good place. So for me then, if you were giving some advice then right now, coming up to the end of 2024, if a business was coming to you, what are the maybe 3-4 things you would say to do to make sure that they're in a good place and are feeling good about their energy?
Good question. So assuming their renewal's up next year, any point I'd be saying get a renewal price now or scheduled into your diary with your provider of your energy supply over the next month or two. That will give you a firm number. A lot of customers assume they know what their renewal will be because they might be getting market reports, etc. Get a firm number from a supplier so you can put that into your budget for the future. And then if it's a scary number, work to change that. If it's a great number, maybe capitalise on that. The other thing, check your bills. A number of suppliers' billing systems have been falling over the last year, and it's starting to really become a big issue. But customers generally don't understand an accurate bill, let alone an incorrect one. It's difficult to understand what the problems are. So if you're unsure about your bills, outsource it and get someone to make sure you're only paying for what you use. And thirdly, think about buying differently. If you use a lot of energy, think about buying shorter chunks, think about purchasing flexibly just to mitigate that risk rather than fixing at the top and regretting the decision.
Okay, excellent.
So I'm interested in terms of kind of the non-commodity side, in terms of the tax side. What's the key area that you guys kind of focus on? Where do you find the big wins with your kind of typical clients?
For us, it links. It's really interesting what you've just said about feeling good about your energy. I always say, for our clients is understanding what goes into your bill, and then understanding what's out there. And at the moment, there's been quite a big ramp up from the government in terms of putting compensation and exemption schemes in place for businesses. One of the reasons is there's actually very few levers the government has in terms of growth. And if you look at the last election, both major parties talked about growth, generating growth, and we now have a new government and all they talk about is generating growth. How are we going to pay for things without tax cuts? We're going to pay for it via growth. Actually, stimulating growth is fairly tricky at the moment for governments, but one thing they do have is a indirect way of reducing big clients or manufacturing or people who produce things is reducing their energy costs. And actually one of the levers they have is they can help reduce their energy costs by reducing their taxes. So the big things at the moment, there's a number. There's the network charges compensation scheme, which went live earlier this year. That's a significant piece of work. That links into the energy intensive industries scheme. So the big wins for us is if you are, I would say, an organisation that uses a significant amount of energy, just what you said, I would get advice that allows you to sleep well at night in terms of get somebody to have a look at what you do, have a look at what activities you carry out. You'd be surprised how many organisations don't believe they are eligible for these schemes. Because these schemes on the face of it look like for manufacturing. Actually, the reality, there's lots of organisations that do. A great example, you mentioned farming. We've come across a number of farms recently who, a large, significant number of their buildings, the electricity is used for staff living or it's used for holiday lets, particularly in the summer. Yeah, and it's a domestic opportunity. So there's exemptions there. So for me, similar to you, I would suggest any business that is using a significant amount of energy. So if the energy is a significant amount of their costs, absolutely get some advice, have a look at the schemes that are available. There's a number out there, and utilise the advice of someone who does understand tax, hence us, to get that view.
With regards to energy intensive industries, you would assume that organisations know whether they qualify for that? Are you finding that there's an awareness of those schemes, or is it becoming a bit of a shock to some businesses? Or they're just not aware of how to actually access the exemptions?
A bit of everything, but absolutely categorically there's businesses out there who we're finding every month we will have a new client where we can make an energy intensive industries claim, and they've not made one in the past, and arguably they could have been making it for 5, 6, 7 years. And we find them regularly, and it surprises me a bit as well, to be honest. You would have thought it was something that was quite key, but if you think about an organisation, whose role in an organisation is it sometimes to look at energy? Whose role is it sometimes to look at any kind of tax exemption scheme, from R&D to capital allowances to land redemption? Because it doesn't always sit with anybody. Often these things get overlooked. But I think secondly, you touched there on applications. They're difficult and they're complex. And if I'm being brutally honest, they're not particularly well written. So I will read the guidance for some of these schemes and they're not clear. They can be interpreted. And I think what you may find is some businesses have had a look at it and said, it's not for us actually, or we're not eligible. And actually they could have been eligible. So we found both of those areas. So it's a bit of they've never really looked, and secondly, when they have looked, their first instinct is this is for manufacturing, or this is for some other kind of sector and industry, and we're not. But we've got some clients who've been exempt from some very large energy taxes, who you wouldn't if you looked at them. Or an organisation that would do. So, variety of things.
I think it's really important. If you chunk that higher, what ultimately we're saying is I think some customers need to just be more open-minded, actually. The amount of times I've said to customers, well, have you considered having your bills checked professionally? So, no, we look at them. You'd be shocked at how much you can't see on a bill that's incorrect. And it's the same with buying energy flexibly. It sounds complex, and there are some complexities around that, but also there's a lot of automation to make it simple. So don't be frightened by these concepts. Don't be frightened. See them as opportunities, because they will enable you to feel good about your energy costs if you allow that. But it's interesting that you experience on that side of the coin as well.
Yeah, it's similar to everything in terms of sometimes I think because it's a reduction and not a money in the bank, it gets overlooked as something that businesses should look at. Ultimately a P&L is the L is just as important as the P, and ultimately this is a cost going out of a business, and if you can reduce that cost, as such you are reducing that kind of P&L. So I think I agree. I think it's difficult for businesses and energy suppliers. I'm happy to be candid. Energy suppliers do not help. They don't make things easy. A lot of energy suppliers, the billing has been very difficult. We've come across, certainly recently, the network charges compensation scheme. Making claims for that is very difficult because a lot of the costs are not split in bills. So for us our expertise is in this area, we find it hard to get a real clear split of how a bill is calculated. What's a client going to do? They've got no idea. So little things like that don't help. But
There's comfort in that though, right? The customers ask me, should I buy now, should I buy tomorrow, should I buy next week? I said, well, ultimately I have a view, but I don't know. On the expert side, there's still nuance, there's still challenge, there's still a little bit of unknown. So customers should feel a bit more comfort in that. It's not black and white, but at the same time, reach out to people that do have the expertise to kind of look at those things.
I think that's often our key message is that reach out. You've got people out there who do know what they're doing, have been doing it a number of years. It's not the most exciting subject in the world, I'll always say.
I love it.
But me too.
I'm an energy geek, so
that's it. So taxation and energy together. It's not always the most exciting subject. That, exactly. It's the new rock and roll. So it's good. Cool. Well, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. As I said before, myself and Ian have worked together for a number of years before we went our separate ways, I think 2-3 years ago. So it's always good to catch up. I think for me, the main messages are absolutely get expertise. There's people out there who can help. And I think Ian sums it up really nicely by saying feel good about your energy, so you can sleep soundly at night knowing you're in a good place. We have a third in this energy podcast section coming in December, where we'll be talking all things carbon reporting. So definitely listen into what we can talk to people about in terms of how they can report their carbon and maybe reduce those carbon emissions and make a difference to your business and the world as a whole. So that's it. Thanks for your time, Ian.
I'm excited. I look forward to that one.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.